Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Future Dimensions 360. As you guys know, in our last tutorial, we are talking about use effect hook. Now, very basics of use effect hook, component did mount, component did update, and component will unmount we had learned already. There is one main point we had learned that use effect hook will run in every render and re-render of a component. So, in today's tutorial, we will be seeing one common mistake that normally a programmers or a beginner programmers that can do very normal. So let me show you guys. So you will be familiar with that kind of problems and you will be knowing after watching this video how to deal with these kind of problems. I have a class interval counter today. I had set it up for the guys who don't know the class based components. So what I will do here is today I will be using an interval counter. Here I had set up a counter state in my constructor. Then in component did mount I will be setting up an interval that will be calling and that will call an increment counter function every 1 second. What increment counter function will do is increment in the state one time always plus 1. Component will unmount will help me when the component is removing from the DOM. It will clear my interval to save the project or program for the memory leaks. At the end, there is a render function that will allow us to show that counter into the DOM. Let me hit save and go to my browser. I'll be rerunning that. You guys can see my counter is working very normally. After every second, the counter is getting increment. So this is how we can do interval counter in class-based component. Let me move ahead and try to achieve the same functionality with functional component and hook counter. I'll create a new file called interval hook counter.js. RFCE React functional component I will be creating. In that one, I will first use a state variable called counter. I will say const counter and then set counter we will be using to set up the counter by using use state hook and the initial value will be 0. Inside my div I will say h1 counter equals to, for example, counter, and that's it. This is the counter that will appear initially. Let me go to browser. Oh, sorry, let me import that one into my app.js file. I will say interval hook counter. Interval hook counter is here, and I had imported an interval hook counter in our app.js. You can see the counter value is initially 0, set it up. Now what we have to do is we have to achieve the functionality of counter. There are two main things we have to be done as we learn from class-based component. We have to set up an interval in each second and we have to clear that interval. So how we can do that? Set up an interval is we have to do use effect hook. We have to call inside that one. First parameter will be our callback. By the way, we don't have any component did update here. So we will pass an empty array as a dependency to call this method once. The first thing what we will do here is let interval equals to set interval. What we have to set interval is we have to, I will say const increment counter. I have to call the function call increment counter. I will be creating an arrow function increment counter. Inside this increment counter, I will say set counter equals to counter plus 1. So this one I will be calling that function increment counter after every 1 second. The set interval function is taking second parameter as a time value in milliseconds. So first thing we had achieved, that is component did mount. How we can achieve component will unmount? By using return in useEffect. As you guys know, in our last tutorial, we had told you that return function is the function that will be called when the component will be unmounted from the DOM. So what it will do, it will clear the interval. Which interval it will be clearing? The interval that we had created. So let's hit save and try to go to browser. You guys can see the counter value is 1 and it's not incrementing anymore. Let me go and try to hit Control Shift R to reload the browser. You guys can see the counter value was initially 0, changed to 1. Later on, it didn't get incremented in our functional component counter. Why? We had done what? We had learned that we have to achieve component did mount and component will unmount. That we have done already. We had created component did mount by passing an empty array as a dependency, and component will unmount will be a return function that we had passed. But our counter is not working as expected. In this scenario, what we have to do here is we have to keep one thing in mind by writing a use effect hook. When you are passing this dependency as an empty array, this dependency doesn't mean that component will watch for its state, as there is no initial state available inside the function. We are using hook, use state hook as a state that allows us to create state inside a function component. So we need something to watch the updates in that states as well. How we can watch? By using use effect hook. We need to tell to React, hey React, please watch for any run this function only when there is any kind of changes in my state variable called counter. So in this dependency, make sure that you have to pass always a variable where you are getting changes simultaneously. So it will show into your browser. Let me hit save and show you guys. You guys can see Control Shift R. Now the counter will work as expected. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's getting incremented. There is another way to deal with this problem is in case if you are not watching for changes here, so you can pass this set counter as a callback, and in that callback you will be taking the previous counter as a parameter and return previous counter plus 1 the second way. Control Shift R, you guys can see it will work as expected as well. So here in this scenario, now you are always watching the changes by using use state hook. Either you can use state hook like set counter is a function that is returned from use state hook. You are watching through that, or you can watch the changes through use effect hook. In case you are passing an empty array, make sure that you don't have any kind of dependency. In case you will have any kind of dependency, then you will be facing a problem. For example, I'll give you a handy tip in that. You guys are creating a function, for example, called do something. For example, that's the function you had created inside. I will say like this and this, and in the initial you had called constant. So for example, this do something is saying console dot log, and I will say something is a variable that you need to print. So if you will call this function here inside your useEffect hook, in this scenario, your console.log will print always when there is a changes in the something. What you want here is, but you will be forgetting that something is your dependency you have to pass here. In case you are calling any kind of function, same as what you have done here is that you forgot to add the counter that you are incrementing. So the handy tip is that instead of declaring function separately and calling inside the useEffect hook, just directly call that function inside the useEffect hook. So it will work very fine and you will not forget any kind of dependency, or it will go through your eyes very easily. I hope you guys understand it. That's it for today's tutorial. Please don't forget to like and subscribe our channel. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.